the inevitable twist, why Season 1 was actually the finale. Jeff Pinkner always say the ending will be inevitable yet surprising. This means the answer isn't a new secret, it's a recontextualization of Episode 1. We've been peeling back layers of an onion, only to find a snake eating its own tail. From electricity without wires to music that precedes the event, the clues were never riddles, they were rules. You aren't moving forward, you're just realizing you already passed the destination. Let's look at why. When are we? Is the only question that matters. What's happening here isn't just a matter of the moon's shape. It's about the flow of time. Julie isn't observing a reversed phase, she's witnessing a phase that hasn't happened yet in astronomical terms. That's the essence of the situation. In actual astronomy, on February 20th, 2022, we have a waning gibbous moon, which transitions to a waning crescent by February 26. The difference lies not in the direction of the light, but in the moon's position within its orbit. However, in Fromville, the calendar doesn't quite match up. This indicates that it's not the moon that's rotating, rather, it's the very order of cause and effect that's been altered. In a typical world, we experience cause-time effect. But here, it's as if the effect is presented first, followed by the cause. The waning crescent moon is actually the last phase, yet it appears on the very first night. This is a classic sign that the system produces stable results before compelling reality to align with those conditions. This phenomenon supports three concepts simultaneously as real-time compression, a measurable phase jump of 6 days, and the operation of a tower mechanism. The world hasn't truly arrived instead. The sky is forced to act as if it has. It's dark enough to exert control, yet bright enough to inspire false hope. This clever and efficient setup reveals that the upside-down nature of Fromville indicates an inversion of time and meaning, rather than a simple visual shift. In Fromville, the system chooses the desired outcome, and reality must align with that choice. So it's not that events are reversed, rather, the end state is treated as the starting point. The waning crescent moon signifies a world running low on energy, not one that's just beginning. Yet, the system places that phase on the first night, indicating that the world starts in a state of exhaustion. Hope doesn't flourish, it's gradually depleted. In Fromville, a false ending transforms into a beginning that's never allowed to reach zero. It's not a perfect cycle, but rather a broken loop. It's not so much that everything starts from the beginning instead. Everything is forced to start from an unfinished end state. The world isn't born, it teeters on the edge of collapse. The sealing ritual performed by the children isn't the conclusion of the story, it's more like a snapshot of the ideal state according to the old system. When the seal is created, the world stabilizes, but at a cost. Dilemma arises when the system is reluctant to release the seal, yet hesitant to pay the price for complete resolution. The result of the sealing is used continuously, blocking the process toward the end. The crescent moon on the first night signals, we're already in the decline phase, don't expect spring. Our minds are drawn to stories that start, rise, and conclude. But Fromville tells a tale that begins in a post-crisis state, pretending that nothing has happened. This is why many characters feel, This city was already in ruins before we arrived. It's as if there's a history we're missing out on. The consequences they face precede their personal actions. Imagine stepping into a town that seems to be at the start of a story. The lights are on, the houses stand tall, and the people are alive. Yet something feels off. Like you've accidentally walked into the last chapter. That's Fromville. In a typical world, events unfold in a straightforward order. Something causes an event, time passes, and then you see the outcome. But Fromville operates differently. Fromville doesn't begin fresh, it begins weary. Now, here's the unsettling truth. This doesn't mean time is simply reversed. It signifies that the town has already predetermined where things should conclude, and everyone inside is being gently nudged toward that outcome. Think of it like being dropped into a play where the final scene has already been scripted. The actors are merely filling in the steps, even if they're unsure of their lines. Thus, Fromville exists in a harsh compromise. The ending is always looming, while the beginning keeps repeating. The town feels ancient, even to newcomers. The past seeps into the present, leaving people with the sensation that they're bearing the weight of mistakes they never committed. In From, there's a fascinating exchange between beginnings and endings. What we witness in S1E1 isn't the start of the story. It's actually the conclusion of a lengthy cycle. Conversely, what we perceive as the ending serves as the initiation of the next cycle. The sequence is intentionally flipped. In the typical world, we follow a path of beginning, process, and then end. However, in Fromville, it's end, process, and then beginning. Since episode 1, the town has felt weary. The rules were already set in motion before we even grasped who established them. The consequences were in place before the wrongdoing was fully realized. Season 1, Episode 1 represents a state after the seal has been active for far too long, not a creation phase, but rather a maintenance mode. Meanwhile, the true beginning, the sacrifice, the oath, the contract always unfolds at the end of the story, revealing itself only through flashbacks, dreams, artwork, or fragmented memories. That's why the narrative of From gives the impression that we keep moving forward, yet what we're truly after lies behind us. This isn't mere coincidence, it's the very structure of the tale. Pinkner employs the chicken or egg analogy, suggesting that neither truly came first. Instead, we find ourselves in a loop without a clear origin. More specifically, the origin has been erased by the loop itself. In a linear world, asking which came first makes sense since time flows in one direction: cause, time, effect. However, in Fromville, the effect comes before the cause. The beginning is at the end, and memory precedes the event. Everything is intricately connected. So when Pinkner notes, it becomes more overtly obvious why they needed to look for why they look the way they looked. It's not merely about aesthetics or production details. It hints at a deeper truth: the form of the world. The monsters, the children, and the tower all arise from something that hasn't yet occurred, but has already been remembered. Here lies the crux. Memory leaks before the event. The children may not foresee what's coming, but they recall the outcome. Consequently, the world fabricates its causes to justify that memory. Thus, the egg exists because the world remembers the chicken, and the chicken exists because the world remembers the egg. This isn't a broken paradox, it's a carefully crafted bootstrap paradox. There is no initial creation, only a self-sustaining repetition. Each cycle doesn't simply replicate the previous one, it adapts, so that the final outcome remains unchanged. This explains why S1E1 feels already tired, why the final phase of the moon appears on the first night, and why the rules precede the reasons. The most genuine answer to that question is the chicken and the egg were birthed simultaneously from a memory of an end that hasn't yet occurred. Or, in the From context, this world didn't originate from a beginning. It emerged from the fear of the end and then looped itself until that fear became a constant truth. That's why, when all the mythology is finally unveiled, we won't exclaim, "Oh, so this is the beginning." Instead, we'll say, "No wonder everything looked that way from the start." And the circle closes beautifully. This show is all about the journey and the process of uncovering deeper truths. In a traditional storyline, a journey implies a clear beginning, middle, and end. Peeling back the layers suggests revealing secrets and core truths. However, From operates outside of linear storytelling. Here, the journey doesn't progress forward, it moves in a circular fashion. The layers aren't simply stacked, they fold over one another through the passage of time. Uncovering layers in From isn't like unwrapping a box of mysteries. It's more akin to peeling an onion, only to discover a snake eating its own tail. The outer and inner layers reflect the same reality, just seen from different temporal perspectives. When one layer is revealed, it doesn't lead to a definitive answer, but rather presents another iteration of the same question. Each answer feels oddly familiar, as if it's something you've known but momentarily forgotten. The audience shares this experience with the characters, a structural sense of déjà vu. The journey here isn't about reaching a destination, it's about realizing that you've already passed it. This connects to the earlier chicken and egg theory. The first layer introduces monsters, the town, and the rules of the night. The next layer delves into children, sacrifice, and the tower. Then there's the layer of reversed time and leaking memories. So when Griffin speaks of peeling back layers, he's not offering a promise that everything will make sense later. Instead, he's hinting at a more complex and poignant realization. The last layer reveals why the first layer seemed so perplexing from the start. The journey in From isn't about finding answers. It's about accepting that you've been at the conclusion of the story since the very first episode. Each part of the series is a self-aware reiteration. In simpler terms, Lost asks, "Where are we?" while From inquires, "When are we really?" Ultimately, after all the layers are peeled away, the answer emerges. We are at the end, disguised as the beginning. That's why the characters and the world appear as they do. Not for style, but because the form of this world is a scar from an answer that has already unfolded. Inevitable and surprising, two concepts that often seem to contradict each other. In narrative theory, this presents a fascinating paradox. Inevitable refers to something that feels unavoidable, as if it was predetermined from the start. Surprising, on the other hand, brings a sense of novelty, something that isn't easily predictable. When both elements coexist, it suggests that the conclusion doesn't stem from a shocking twist, but rather from a fresh perspective on familiar elements. This implies that the resolution won't come through a straightforward answer, but through recontextualization. Instead of saying, "Oh, it turns out X is Y," the revelation is more like, "Oh, I see now that I misunderstood X from the beginning." The crux of the matter lies in this pivotal idea. Reflecting on the start of the show, it makes perfect sense that this is how it must conclude. Notice the flow here. It's not the conclusion that clarifies the beginning, but the beginning that holds the essence of the conclusion. However, there's a vital twist, not symbolic or metaphorical, but structural. Episode 1 isn't merely the story's opening, it acts as a fragment of the cycle's end that we are revisiting, which explains why certain elements may feel strange, but left unexplained. Many details seem significant yet remain ambiguous. Clues appear decorative rather than directive because we're observing them from an incorrect angle. There are clues all along the way, but these aren't traditional clues. This is where viewers often misinterpret the intention. The clues Griffin refers to aren't riddles to be solved or puzzles to be figured out. They provide insight into how to interpret this world. For instance, the moon appearing in the wrong phase isn't a mistake, but a hint about the flow of time. Electricity functioning without wires isn't a technological enigma. It indicates that this world doesn't adhere to cause and effect. Music that plays spontaneously isn't just a horror trope. It suggests that narrative comes before events. All these clues don't lead to a singular answer. Instead, they establish the rules for understanding reality. That's why viewers notice the clues, but haven't yet grasped the foundational concepts. This distinction is crucial. Griffin clearly distances himself from the notion of Lost syndrome. This difference is key. Lost frequently introduces new mysteries to obscure previous ones. In contrast, From revisits the same themes: children, sacrifice, folded time, try again, and voices that precede events. This recurrence isn't a sign of a lack of creativity. It's a practice in interpretation. It's akin to rereading a sentence until you finally realize, oh, this isn't the language I thought I understood. Griffin assures that justice will be served, though not necessarily easily. Here, justice means no answers will appear out of the blue, and no new rules will emerge at the finale. The audience won't receive explicit guidance. There won't be an episode that clarifies, this signifies A, and that means B. Ultimately, it's fair only if the audience accepts that they didn't forget details, rather, they misunderstood the orientation of time and cause and effect. Summarizing this logic, the ending of From likely won't verbally clarify all the lore. Instead, it will represent a significant shift in perspective, transforms from being the start of the story to evidence that the end has already transpired. Suddenly, all the previous clues align. The audience realizes we weren't deceived, we simply viewed it from the wrong angle. This encapsulates the true essence of being both inevitable and surprising. Not because it's clever, but because it remains faithful to the structure established from the outset. That's where From will either shine or falter as a work of art. Reflecting on the start of the show, it's clear that this is how it must conclude. This isn't just a nostalgic remark, it's a commentary on how we interpret the narrative. The early episodes serve not as the cause, but as the effect that precedes the cause, which we will discover only at the end. What truly matters isn't the wrong phase of the moon, but rather that the final phase is visible from the very first night. This is a prime example of the effect being revealed before its cause. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? In a closed cyclical system, there's no definitive first, only a perspective from which we read. When a symbol appears just once, it invites limitless interpretation. Yet in From, elements like the moon, electricity, sound, music, memory, and death all follow a consistent reverse order. This indicates that the world operates on reverse logic, rather than simply narrating a story about reversal. There are hints throughout that reveal how it was all going to unfold. It's not about identifying the villain, the final ritual, or who meets their end, but rather understanding how this world functions. The clues lie in the moon phases, the precedence of sound, dreams, electricity activating without a trigger, and memories surfacing first, events that follow suit. These aren't mere hints to the plot, they're insights into the logic of reality itself. From doesn't obscure the answer, it conceals the path of interpretation. And that path